Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Talk. I'm Josh, and today I'm going to dive into The Elephant Man, a film that, despite being one of David Lynch's more straightforward narratives, still carries his unmistakable signature, haunting imagery, emotional depth, and a quiet but powerful sense of unease. Now, The Elephant Man was released in 1980, making it Lynch's second feature film, right after our last episode's nightmarish debut, Eraserhead. And let's be real, if you've seen Eraserhead, you know how wildly experimental and unsettling that film is. So, coming into The Elephant Man, you might expect something equally bizarre or abstract. But the thing is, Lynch really reins in the surrealism, and he tells this deeply human, heartbreaking story. And yet, without those overt strangeness, there's still something undeniably Lynchian about this film. When The Elephant Man premiered, it was a huge success with both critics and audiences, earning 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director for Lynch, and Best Actor for John Hurt. But here's a bit of an Oscar controversy for you. It didn't win a single one. And yet, its impact was so undeniable that the Academy actually created a whole new category because of it. Best Makeup, which was introduced the very next year, largely thanks to the incredible prosthetic work that transformed John Hurt into John Merrick. I mean, that's literally how significant this film was. It changed the Oscars. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about my personal experience with The Elephant Man, because this isn't just some film you watch and move on from. Like the vast majority of his films, this one sticks with you. And the first time I saw it, I was completely floored by how different it was, how restrained the filming was. He didn't lean into the eerie and the creepy, but it was still so deeply affecting. It still had a little bit of that dreamlike Lynch, but more so, it was a story that felt so raw and human. And yet, even though this is one of Lynch's most accessible films, it still has that signature atmosphere. The eerie black and white cinematography, the unsettling sound design, and the way he frames the world, it all feels just a little bit off kilter. And let's be honest, this movie kind of hurts. It's heartbreaking in a way that feels almost too real at times. But what makes it so special is that it's not just about the suffering. At its core, The Elephant Man is actually a story about dignity, about kindness in the face of cruelty, and about what it actually means to truly be seen as a human being. And I think that's why it still resonates so deeply today. Revisiting it for this episode only reinforced my admiration for it. It's a film that doesn't just tell a story, it makes you feel something, and that, to me, is what truly great cinema is all about. So let's get into it, how this film came to be, what made David Lynch, of all directors, the right person for this story, and just what is it about The Elephant Man that continues to make such an impact over 40 years later? Let's dive in. Before we dive into the making of The Elephant Man, let's talk about how unexpected this project was for David Lynch. At the time, he was just known, at least in underground circles, for his deeply unsettling and surreal debut, Eraserhead. We all know that film was nightmarish, an industrial fever dream that felt like some bizarre hallucination. So on the surface, Lynch directing a historical drama about a real-life figure might seem like an odd match. But once you watch The Elephant Man, you realize that it actually makes perfect sense. Lynch was always fascinated by outsiders, by people who don't fit neatly into society's expectations. In this story, it gave him the perfect opportunity to explore that idea in a deeply human way. So how did this project land in Lynch's hands? Well, we have none other than the great Mel Brooks to thank for that. Yes, it's that Mel Brooks, the mastermind behind Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. He wasn't just, or isn't just, a comedic genius. He was also the producer behind The Elephant Man through his company, Brooks Films. Now, Brooks was an enormous fan of Eraserhead, which again is kind of wild to think about, but he saw something in it that convinced him Lynch was the perfect director for this project. And it's not as crazy as it sounds, because underneath the surreal horror of Eraserhead, there is an emotional depth and a haunting sense of loneliness that fit perfectly with this story of John Merrick. But Brooks also knew that his name carried certain expectations, and he didn't want audiences thinking they were about to see a quirky, offbeat comedy. So he made a very deliberate choice. He kept his name completely off the marketing. None of this from the producer of Young Frankenstein on the poster. No Mel Brooks presents in the trailers. Just a very straightforward and serious approach. And in hindsight, that was absolutely the right call. It allowed the audience to engage with the Elephant Man on its own terms and without any preconceived notions. And we can't talk about the Elephant Man without talking about one of the biggest hurdles in making this movie, and that's the makeup. John Hurt, who played John Merrick, went through an absolutely grueling process every day to transform into the character. We're talking hours in the makeup chair, having layers of prosthetics applied to create the intricate and historically accurate look of Merrick's real-life deformities. The makeup was based on actual medical records, and the level of detail was so incredible that it set a new standard for practical effects in film. And in fact, like I mentioned earlier, the work was so impressive that when the Academy Awards rolled around, people were outraged that there wasn't an Oscar category for Best Makeup. So strong, in fact, that, like I said, the Academy created a whole new category the very next year. That's how big of a deal this really was. And what's interesting is that despite all of the technical innovation, The Elephant Man was still very much Lynch's vision. A lot of filmmakers, especially young ones who are working on their first studio film, tend to have their hands tied by studio interference. But somehow Lynch was actually given a surprising amount of creative freedom here. There are some undeniably Lynchian moments in the film, especially in the dream sequences. But even beyond that, the entire atmosphere, the way the Industrial Revolution setting feels cold and claustrophobic, the way sound design is used to make everything feel slightly off, that all feels distinctly Lynch. And I think that's what makes The Elephant Man so special, because it's not just a straightforward historical drama. It's not just a Lynchian nightmare. It's this beautiful blend of both. And you can see Lynch evolving as a filmmaker here, learning how to tell a deeply emotional story while still keeping his own unique style intact. It's a film that is restrained when it needs to be, but never loses its power, and that makes this one of the most remarkable films in his entire career. You know, it's easy to just call The Elephant Man a straightforward biopic, but the reality doesn't do it justice. It's a special film that it sticks with you, and it's not just that it tells the story of John Merrick's tragic life. It's how Lynch tells it. He doesn't just ask us to sympathize with Merrick. He forces us to confront the ugliness in the way people treated him. The film takes a deeply compassionate approach, but it never lets us off the hook as viewers. It asks us, do we see Merrick as a person? Or do we, like so many around him, see only the spectacle? Rather than breaking this down scene by scene, I just want to talk about what the Elephant Man really means, what it's saying about humanity, about dignity, and about cruelty. Because I think that's important in the time and in the world we live in now. So let's dive into the themes and the symbolism that make this film one of, if not Lynch's most moving and powerful works. So the core theme of human dignity versus exploitation, because at the heart of The Elephant Man is the question of human dignity. John Merrick is intelligent, articulative, he is deeply sensitive, but society refuses to see past his deformities. He's constantly treated as something other, whether it's as a freak show attraction, a medical case study, or even a curiosity for polite society. And that's where the film really hits hard. Even the well-meaning people in Merrick's life sometimes fail to see him as a whole person. Take Dr. Frederick Treves, Anthony Hopkins' character, for example. He rescues Merrick from the abuse of the carnival, provides him with care, and introduces him to high society. But even he has to face the uncomfortable truth that he too is using Merrick. At one point, Treves wonders aloud if he's really any different from the showman who exploited Merrick at the circus. Sure, he dresses it up in kindness and medical curiosity, but is Merrick really free? Or has he just been moved from one kind of spectacle to another? And I think this is what makes the film so tragic, because even as Merrick is treated with more respect, there's always the lingering question. Is it true compassion, or is it pity? Is he being embraced for who he is, or for what he represents? And then there's the horror of society's cruelty. Now, The Elephant Man isn't truly a horror film, especially not in the way that Eraserhead or Blue Velvet are. But it still has moments that feel terrifying. And the horror doesn't come from Merrick's appearance, but from how he's treated. His first real introduction in the film is almost staged like a monster reveal. Treves brings in a group of doctors and presents Merrick as this medical curiosity, describing his condition cold and clinically, while Merrick stands there, powerless. And us in the audience, and in the film, and the theater watching the movie, all become part of the spectacle. And it's really unsettling. And Lynch, I think, wanted us to really feel that discomfort. Then there's the nightmarish train station scene. Merrick, lost, surrounded by a crowd, is pushed, prodded, and harassed until he falls to the floor. It's one of the most gut-wrenching moments in the entire film, and then, in pure desperation, he cries out, "I am not an animal, I am a human being, I am a man." This moment, this is the emotional climax of the film. It's raw and heartbreaking, and it's so human. And what's worse is the crowd only stops when they realize they've gone too far. Not because they saw Merrick as a person, but because they realized they had become the monsters. And then there's the Lynchian elements, the surrealism, and the sound design. Unlike most of Lynch's films, The Elephant Man is relatively straightforward, but that doesn't mean it's missing his signature touch. Lynch still finds a way to inject surrealism into the story, particularly through the film's opening and closing moments. The opening sequence is a classic Lynch feel. It's strange, abstract, and a little unsettling. We see a slow motion nightmare, an image of Merrick's mother, a charging elephant, and distorted sound that feels like it's seeping in from some other world. It suggests the legend behind Merrick's condition, that his mother was trampled by an elephant while pregnant, though we know this is nothing more than superstition. But Lynch isn't interested in telling us what's real and what's not. Instead, he shows us how people perceive Merrick's condition, how myths and fear shape his identity before he ever has any say in it. And then there's the sound design. Because Lynch, as we all know, is a master at using sound to create unease. And while The Elephant Man doesn't have the industrial noise of Eraserhead or the warped, dreamlike soundscape of Twin Peaks, it still uses sound brilliantly. The clatter of factory machines, the echo of jeering voices, the pounding of hooves in the opening sequence, all of it makes the weird world that they inhabit feel cold, mechanical, and unkind. And then there's symbolism, the mask and the reflection. Because one of the most interesting visual motifs in the film is the use of mirrors and masks. Merrick himself constructs a small model of a church, something delicate and beautiful, something he builds with his own hands. It represents his desire for peace, for something beyond the cruelty that he feels in the world. But then we have the literal mask he wears, the cloth he pulls over his head to hide his face. It's heartbreaking because it's not for him, it's for everyone else. The mask isn't to protect him from the world, it's to protect the world from having to look at him. Mirrors also play an important role. Treves often looks at himself in the mirror, and in those moments, that's when we see his doubt, his guilt, and he's forced to confront himself, who he is, and what his role is in Merrick's life. The mirror reflects more than just his face. It reflects the moral questions that are at the heart of the film. The tragic beauty of the ending is also very important. After achieving some semblance of dignity and acceptance, Merrick makes a choice. He removes his pillows, the ones that allow him to sleep upright, the only way he can sleep safely, and lies down, fully knowing this will end his life. Is it surrender? Is it peace? Is it the final act of a man who finally feels like he belongs? It's left somewhat ambiguous, but it's undeniably poetic. Lynch ends the film with another surreal sequence, bringing back the image of Merrick's mother as she whispers to him, "Nothing will die." It's a moment of sadness, yeah, but also one of transcendence. In death, Merrick is finally free, not from his deformities, but from the cruelty of the world that really never truly let him live. At the end of the day, The Elephant Man is about so much more than its plot. It's about empathy, about the way we judge others, and about what it means to be seen. I think it challenges us to question our own perceptions of beauty, humanity, and morality. And that's why this is one of David Lynch's greatest films. It might not have the surrealism of Mulholland Drive or the horror of Eraserhead, but it has something just as powerful. It has heart. It's a film that stays with you, and one that reminds us all that we need to look past the surface and see the humanity in others. Now, one of the things that makes Elephant Man such a powerful experience is how much emotion it conveys without ever feeling overly sentimental. This is a film that could have easily leaned into melodrama, but instead it opts for subtlety, restraint, and some very grounded human performances. Every element, the acting, the cinematography, the sound design, all works together to create something that feels real, even as it maintains that dreamlike, almost nightmarish quality. Let's start with the performances, because honestly, they are the heart and soul of this film. First, we have John Hurt as John Merrick. John Hurt delivers what I would argue is one of the most difficult performances in film history. He's acting through layers of prosthetics that cover nearly his entire face. Yet he still manages to create one of the most deeply felt and heartbreaking performances of all time. Without traditional facial expressions to rely on, Hurt conveys everything through his voice, his posture, and these small, incredibly delicate movements. Whether it's the way he trembles slightly when he's frightened, or the way his body tenses when someone looks at him with disgust. One of the best examples of this is in the scene where Merrick recites Psalm 23. Up until this point, Dr. Treves and others assume that Merrick has severe cognitive impairments. But it's then, in this moment, we see the full depth of his intelligence. The way Hurt delivers the line, with a mix of hesitation and pride, it makes the moment really powerful. And it's a turning point for both Merrick and the audience, and it's all in his voice and his delivery. And what's even more remarkable is that his performance could have easily been over the top or exaggerated. Instead, Hurt actually plays Merrick with that quiet dignity. He never asks for our pity. He simply exists as he is. And that makes his moments of suffering all the more devastating. Then there's Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Treves. His performance is fascinating because on paper, Treves is the hero of the story, the kind doctor who rescues Merrick from abuse. But Hopkins plays him with such nuance and internal conflict that there are moments where you can see him questioning whether he's truly helping Merrick or if he's just exploiting him in a more socially acceptable way. There's a particularly powerful scene where Treves confesses his doubts to his wife. He wonders if he's really any different from the people who paid to gawk at Merrick in the freak show. Hopkins delivers this monologue with such an understated emotion. He doesn't break down or have the big dramatic moment. Instead, he plays it with a quiet despair, like the weight of his realization sinking into him in real time. And I think what makes Hopkins' performance even more effective is how much he holds back. He never has the big emotional outburst. There is no grand speech. Instead, Treves is played as a man who is constantly wrestling with his own morality, and it makes his journey so compelling. Now, visually, The Elephant Man is absolutely stunning. The cinematography done by Freddie Francis gives the film this almost gothic quality, and it perfectly matches its setting in the grimy industrial streets of Victorian London. The black and white cinematography does a lot of the heavy lifting. It enhances the stark contrast between light and shadow. And one of the most effective visual techniques in the film is how Merrick is framed. In his early scenes, we rarely see him in full. Lynch holds back, showing him in shadows or from behind or just obscured glimpses, mimicking the way people in the film view him as something mysterious or even monstrous. Then, as the film progresses and we get to know Merrick as a person, Lynch gradually allows us to see him more clearly. It's a subtle but powerful way of visually reinforcing the film's themes. I think another great example of the cinematography's effectiveness is that use of mirrors and reflections. Several of the moments where Merrick sees his reflection, sometimes distorted, sometimes clear, And these shots always carry so much weight. They serve as these quiet, introspective moments where Merrick is forced to confront how the world sees him. Now let's talk about the sound, because this is one of the aspects that really reminds you that this is a David Lynch film. Lynch was always a master of using sound to create atmosphere and emotion, and even though The Elephant Man is a more traditional film, his signature sound design is all over it. The film opens with that abstract nightmare sequence, the surreal montage of industrial noises, distorted animal sounds, and that unsettling imagery. It's a chilling way to start the film, and it immediately sets the tone. Even though The Elephant Man is technically a historical drama, Lynch makes us know for sure that this is going to be an emotionally intense and at times disturbing experience. Throughout the film, Lynch uses sound in a way that puts us in Merrick's perspective. There are moments where background noise, like the chatter of a crowd or the distant clanging of factory machines, becomes almost overwhelming, mirroring the anxiety and isolation that Merrick feels. These subtle touches make a huge difference in immersing us in his world. Then, of course, there's the film's use of silence. Some of the most powerful moments here come when the film just allows us to sit in the quiet, letting the emotions linger. One of the best examples is the final scene where Merrick lays down to sleep. The absence of sound in that moment makes it all the more poignant and so heartbreaking. Every aspect of The Elephant Man, from the performances to the cinematography to the sound design, all works together to create something truly special. It's a film that is both visually striking, deeply emotional, all balancing the historical drama roots with the eerie, dreamlike quality that Lynch becomes known for. John Hurt and Anthony Hopkins delivering some of their best work here, and Freddie Francis's cinematography make this one of the most visually memorable films of the early 80s. And of course, Lynch's ability to use sound and silence to heighten emotion, it's on full display. It's rare to find a film that is this beautiful, this devastating, and this artistically rich all at once. The Elephant Man isn't just a great Lynch film, it's one of the most profoundly moving films ever made. Let's talk about the cultural impact and legacy of The Elephant Man. Now, when it was first released in 1980, it made quite an impression with both critics and audiences. Though it didn't dominate the awards season like some of its contemporaries, such as Raging Bull and Ordinary People, still the film's power was undeniable. Over the years, its reputation has only grown, and it's now often mentioned as one of the defining films of the 80s. And it's not just the powerful performances or the haunting and beautiful cinematography that have left their mark. It's also the way the film has resonated with audiences and other filmmakers alike, creating ripples that can still be felt today. Let's start with the way The Elephant Man has influenced other films. The themes of human dignity, suffering, and societal rejection explored in this movie are still prevalent in many films today. Directors and writers continue to look at this story as an example of how to tackle difficult, often uncomfortable subject matter with both sensitivity and respect. The movie's exploration of the cruel treatment of people who are different has resonated across generations. This is a film that forces us to confront our own biases and the way we treat people who don't fit society's standard of normal. It's easy to look back on the film and see its lasting influence on the movies that want us to dive into the deep complexity of human emotion and societal pressures. But the film didn't just impact the world of storytelling. It also had a significant role in shaping the career of David Lynch. At the time, Lynch was fairly unknown, but The Elephant Man proved that he could balance his distinctive artistic vision with the demands of a major studio film. And that's not a simple feat. And the fact that he could maintain his unique style while working within those constraints, well, that laid the groundwork for what would follow, especially projects like Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, and Mulholland Drive. Without The Elephant Man, it's hard to imagine the world of David Lynch's later work, and even the broader landscape of surreal and psychological storytelling, looking the way that it does today. Now, the film's cultural legacy also extends beyond the world of film because it helped to redefine how we think about the real-life figure of Joseph Merrick. Before The Elephant Man came to theaters, Merrick's story was largely confined to the realms of medical texts and freak show exhibits. He was often remembered as a curiosity, an oddity to be stared at, and not as the fully realized human being that he was. But Lynch's film reintroduced Merrick's story and reintroduced it as one of resilience, dignity, and ultimately compassion. Through the lens of film, Merrick's life became not just a tale of physical suffering, but a story of a man who, despite all odds, found moments of joy, connection, and human kindness. This shift in perception of Merrick's life has only deepened over time, with people continuing to find his story inspiring and tragic in equal measure. Today, we remember Joseph Merrick not as a medical curiosity, but as a symbol of strength and the importance of empathy in the face of difference. In the grand scheme of things, The Elephant Man has left an indelible mark on both cinema and society, challenging the way we think about disability, societal outcasts, and the power of compassion. Its influence continues to shape storytelling today, and its legacy stands as a testament to the power of film to change the way we see the world. All right, so we've been on quite a ride with David Lynch's work, and The Elephant Man is a film that absolutely stands out, especially when we're talking about Lynch's usual territory. Instead of the weird, dreamlike landscapes we might expect from this one, it's grounded in something much more human and honestly a lot more emotional, especially in the raw humanity of John Merrick. So let's take a moment and dive into my final thoughts on the film. And of course, I'll share some of my favorite moments, the moments that hit me the hardest. We'll break it down in two parts. First, a deeper look at what really struck me about the film. And then, as always, I'll give you some of my classic kind of closing thoughts. So if I'm being honest, The Elephant Man is one of David Lynch's finest works. And here's why. It stands out from a lot of what we typically expect from him. Lynch built his reputation for the bizarre, the surreal, the strange visuals that leave us scratching our heads, wondering what's real and what's just a twisted dream. But this movie, it's different. It's not so much about the trippy visuals or the symbolism that you often associate with Lynch's other films. No, this one is all about heart. It's raw and grounded, and to me, it's a beautiful example of Lynch at his most human. And what's so powerful about The Elephant Man is that it doesn't shy away from making us sit with its characters. Most notably, John Merrick, who's a man suffering so deeply. The film forces us to feel the weight of his pain, the burden of his existence, and the crushing loneliness that comes with being an outcast. It's heavy, it's uncomfortable, but that's where the power comes in. Lynch isn't hiding behind foggy dream sequences or weird psychedelic imagery. The horror here isn't the stuff of nightmares. It's much more terrifying than that. It's human cruelty in its most heartless form. And that's a kind of horror that, as much as we don't want to face it, is all too real. The way people can be so awful without reason, without remorse, is gut-wrenching. But here's the twist. In the midst of all that darkness, there's also light. The film doesn't just drown in the despair of Merrick's life. It offers us something beautiful. Human kindness. And let me tell you, it's not the kind of feel-good, sugar-coated kind of kindness that you might expect. It's hard-earned, it's raw, at times it's really messy. But that's why it's so moving. Lynch, for all his weirdness and offbeat approach, really knows how to balance those moments of cruelty with moments of pure, honest compassion. And that balance hits you in a way that no amount of shock value or over-the-top visuals ever could. The film's emotional depth, that's the true horror and the true beauty. Now, the performances really do push this film to a whole different level. John Hurt is incredible, so much vulnerability in his portrayal, but he also has this quiet strength beneath it all. He portrays Merrick not just as a victim, but as a person with depth, complexity, humanity. Hurt's performance is like a punch to the gut, but in like that best human way possible. And Anthony Hopkins brings this calm, steady presence that really contrasts Merrick's emotional intensity. But what really gets me about the Hopkins is the transformation he puts the character through. He's not a perfect hero, not some saint who swoops in to save the day. He plays him as a man grappling with what's right and humane, and we see that struggle so clearly through his interactions with Merrick. There's this subtle evolution in his character, and it's much more effective than if Lynch had just painted him as a noble and flawless victor. In the end, though, The Elephant Man isn't just a film about the cruelty of the world. It's about the ways in which we can choose to rise above the cruelty and offer each other real, raw compassion. It's a hard watch, but it's also a beautiful one. Grounded, honest, and powerful. Lynch will always be known for his surreal and haunting work, but in The Elephant Man, he showed us the kind of humanity that will stick with you. Now, when I think about my favorite scenes in The Elephant Man, there's one that immediately comes to mind, and for me, that's the opera scene. This moment, it hits so hard because it's not just about the music, it's about Merrick finally experiencing something beautiful, something that feels like it belongs to him. Up until that moment, his life has been filled with rejection, with cruelty, and people staring at him as if he were some kind of sideshow. But in the opera house, for just a little while, he's in an environment where he's treated with dignity and respect. And let me tell you, the look on his face as he listens to the music is unforgettable. It's not just a smile, it's something deeper. It's a kind of pure joy that you rarely see in film. He's so overwhelmed by the beauty of the experience, and you can feel how every note touches him on a level that no one else could truly understand. What really gets to me is that for just a moment, all of his suffering seems to fade away. It's like the weight of all those years spent being ridiculed and isolated lifts off his shoulders. Even if it is only for a fleeting second, it feels like he's finally getting to experience something that most of us take for granted, something beautiful, something that transcends everything else. It's a reminder of the healing power of art, kindness, and beauty, even when you feel like you've lost in darkness for so long. And that's why, for me, it's one of the most emotional moments in cinema. It's so simple, and yet it carries so much weight. It's that simplicity that makes it all the more powerful. Now, another scene that stands out for me is when Merrick talks about his dream of being treated like a man, not like a freak. When he says this, it's not in any angry or bitter way. It's just this brutally honest way that just cuts straight to the heart. There's no pretense, no filters. Just the truth of someone who's been treated as less than human for so long. The vulnerability in his voice as he shares his dream is palpable. He's not asking for sympathy. He's just expressing a desire to be seen and to be acknowledged for who he is. That moment is the one that I think sticks with you. You can't forget it because it taps into something universal. The yearning to be respected, to be treated with kindness, and to simply be seen for the person you truly are. It's one of those moments in film that stays with you, makes you reflect on your own humanity, and reminds you of how essential it is to treat others with dignity and respect. Both of these scenes, in different ways, highlight the heart of The Elephant Man, a story about a man who, despite all his struggles and the cruel ways he's been treated, still longs for connection and the beauty of life. They're not just memorable moments in a film, they're emotional milestones that resonate on a much deeper level. Now, start to wrap things up on The Elephant Man. For me, it's still a perfect 10 out of 10. I think it's just barely below an Eraserhead and a Mulholland Drive, but not enough to dock at any points. It's such a powerful film, and what makes it so special is the way it handles empathy and understanding. It's never preachy or over the top. The story doesn't shout at you. Instead, it lets you absorb the humanity of it all. Both the beauty and the darkness at your own pace. It's the kind of movie that doesn't need to tell you what to feel. It just shows you what people are capable of, for better or for worse, and it leaves you thinking. And when we talk about the performances here, wow, just phenomenal. There's something so beautiful and heartbreaking in the portrayals. And this film is all about balance. It finds the perfect middle ground between restraint and emotion, and that's no small feat. There are so many moments where it could have gone over the top, but it doesn't. It holds back, and that's what helps it stay grounded and stay with you. Now, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back and close up the episode. So as we wrap up this episode of Real Talk, talking about the great David Lynch and The Elephant Man, I want to know your thoughts. What did you think? Was there a scene that really stuck with you? Were there any moments that made you rethink the film, or maybe even the way we see people in society? I know this film hits a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, so please reach out and share your perspective. Come check me out. We're on the socials, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Real Talk. We're also on email for you old school kids, therealrealtalk@gmail.com. Please reach out. And if you like what you're hearing, please like, subscribe, share, leave a review, a 5-star rating, all those things. Even if it doesn't help the algorithm, it makes me feel good. And I just want to talk with you guys. That's what this is for, to open up conversations. Now, if you also like the darker side of things, you're more into the horror, check out our other channel, Real Talk Horror Edition. Or, if you're like me and you're a book nerd, check out Real Talk Grimm Edition, where we break down the original Grimm's fairy tales. And don't forget to join me next time as we continue to dive into David Lynch's incredible filmography. Next week is his take on Dune. We've got more to explore, and there's a lot to unpack. But until then, always remember, film is like a dream, and sometimes it's a beautiful one.
Underneath the sun screen, gleam, talking reels and all their schemes, dusty scenes and dreams unfold, stories told in shadows bold, gritty plots and whispers tight, dim the streets and moonlight bright.